fellow travelers, and welcome to the Diverging the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And remember, click that subscribe button, everybody. An amazing show for you because boarding the mothership is Jeremy Adams. He's the current writer of The Flash from DC comic books. Now come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Adams. Thank you so much for coming to the Diverging the Stars podcast.
I can't believe I'm here. I had to traverse the stars to get on the podcast. So this is great.
You know, my first version of this, I wanted to start off with a rocket launching from Earth, and so it'd be like you're coming towards the thing, but apparently that costs money, and I can't do it.
Yeah, totally.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comics, and who your earliest influences?
So my love of comics started because my dad drew some DC comics back in the day. He had drawn a run of Ghosts, I think a few issues of Ghosts in the 70s. And up until recently, I don't know, I guess I didn't realize that he drew a bunch of issues, a handful of issues for Captain Atom in the 80s, an Alpha Flight or two. And so when my parents got divorced, especially, I think it was a way to have a safe place to communicate around was comic books. And of course I loved it. I was a little kid. So it was like I'm wearing underoos and I have a Batmobile and, doing all that stuff. And that was kind of the first, like, I don't know, that there was never a time before comic books, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
I do remember my first comic though, that I bought. Like I know my dad had comics and I would look at them, but I got a shot when I was a really little kid, like, whatever the shot is you get. And I must have been 3 or 4. I don't even know. But we went to I think it was a Circle K or 7-Eleven and a spinner rack, and it was a Detective Comics. And I remember, and I bought it recently because I remember what happened in it. Killer Croc was an assassin. Jason Todd was in it, but he had blonde hair. And it was really scary. I mean, I remember reading it going like, this is terrifying as a little kid. I read it again. It's not as terrifying, but but I remember that being like, oh my goodness, this is really wild. And that just kind of started me down the road.
That is awesome. So it's all his fault. Your father's fault.
Oh yeah, most things are.
Well, for me, it was my father's fault too. Like I said, just like you, I've been buying comic books since long before I can remember not having comic books. I can't remember what the first issues I ever had were, but the one that always stuck in my mind is an issue of Justice League of America. I can't remember the number, but I have the issue on my wall because I got Jerry Conway to sign for it.
Amazing.
And there's a panel. I just remember the panel that stuck in my head forever of Red Tornado flying towards an airplane, and later there's when a firestorm was in it. And I just like, Jesus Christ, this was. And then awesome. I got sucked in forever.
Yeah, I mean, because there was like this uptick of, like I said, underoos or whatever, and then the superpowers collection happened, and I remember being obsessed with the superpower. I still have my Hall of Justice, and my girls think it's the coolest toy to play with, and a bunch of action figures. But that was it was a great time to be and in Wizard magazine. And then as I got a little older, it was like the Image Revolution, and it was like, it was really neat. And then what burnt me out was all the collector stuff, all the tinfoil cover. You got to have 5 versions, and I remember I couldn't do it. It was, I don't know if it was X-Force 1 or whatever. I bought so many copies of issue 1 because they had the collector's cards inside the plastic wrap, and I was just like a little kid. I was like, I have no money, this is terrible.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it was the late 90s when Marvel Overpower came out, the cards that you got into comic books. And it broke my heart to cut them open, the comic books. I was like, I have to play.
I know. Yeah. That's funny.
That's awesome. So you're the writer behind The Flash.
Yes.
So you've been writing The Flash for a little while now, almost 2 years, I think, if memory serves.
Yeah. So I mean, it blows my mind when I think about it.
So how has your understanding of Wally West changed or developed over the tenure of the book?
Originally, that's why the first arc that started in 768 was kind of designed the way it was, that kind of quantum leapy whatever. It was a chance for me to kind of get to know Wally. And get to know, and by that I mean get to know the version I'm going to write. And it was about kind of acclimating myself to what the character was and who the character was, and also touching on all those other speedsters. So I kind of knew the tableau of what we were going to be talking about, going forward, hopefully, if no one fired me. So so what happened was the idea that here's this guy that absolutely he's going to leave being a superhero because he is one of the most kind of traumatized characters in DC Comics in a way. Erased from, a murderer, erased from continuity, lost his kids. It was like, oh my gosh, this is brutal. So it was like, well, how do you make that guy want to do this again? And how do you take somebody that has the most, like, a really big form of trauma or whatever, and make him be a hero again? There's a lot of him that just resembled where I am in my life. With, I have two kids and I'm married and a family man and trying to work and trying to do other things, and that all kind of boiled into there, and really bad puns, bad jokes and stuff like that. But at the heart of it, it was also about him overcoming grief in a way. And and there's this element of Wally, that my own personal continuity of Wally, and I'm going to talk about it actually in 788 and 789 a little bit, is that I think Wally is aware of a lot of things that have gone on in the DC universe that maybe other people haven't been aware. And because he's experienced all this bad stuff, because just like when he came back from being disappeared in continuity, he has an incredible amount of empathy for everybody, because he's been to the lowest low. And when you've been there, you tend to treat villains a little differently. You tend to treat heroes a little differently. You make the most important thing the most important thing, which is his family and his kids and his wife. So my understanding of him is morphed. It's also my understanding of the Flash family, and really realizing how powerful they actually are. I mean, and the nerd talk of it is like, I do think they're the most powerful. It's Wally in particular, maybe his daughter might be the most powerful beings in the DC universe in my mind. And that's kind of a heavy crown to wear a little bit, because he can do anything. He can move so fast, everybody's going to stand still. So at that point, what can stop you?
Right.
You know?
Well, I think one interesting thing about your run on the Flash is that you've allowed Wally West to develop as his own individual, and partly because, once again, Barry Allen has not been in the picture. He's
Right.
disappeared due to Dark Crisis, which we'll get to in a moment. So when Barry comes back, which I assume he's going to, from the issues and to solicits everything else, how will you keep Wally West from getting overshadowed by Barry, the previous Flash?
Well, I mean, luckily, Barry will show up in the Flash, especially for 1 Minute War that's going to start in January, and that'll run for a few issues. Like, all the speedsters are going to be there, but he still won't be the main. He won't be in the book as the main Flash. Wally's still going to be taking that moniker, because there are other things for Barry to do that are outside of my purview, you know. But I imagine, because I have a relationship that, Joshua Williams, who has been an incredible cheerleader for me and an incredible guidepost, especially with the Flash. I think he kind of caretakes Barry a bit, and it'll be fun to be able to borrow him from time to time, and hopefully do crossovers or whatever else. And but I've been having a real good time writing Barry now in 1 Minute War, and I've written Barry in other medium before, like World War Justice Society, World War II movie. My first DTV was a Lego Flash that had, Barry Allen as the main character. And so I've written him different ways, and obviously in the very first couple issues of the Flash proper that I was writing, Barry was there, and Barry was trying to figure out how to get Wally out. And I think there's an interesting thing. I really do think what's interesting is that, in a way, the way I explore Barry, or the way I think about Barry, is he is a slightly nerdy scientist guy, which is great, but also he's watching his mentee surpass him in certain ways. And I don't mean about powers. I mean, Wally West might have the most, outside of maybe the super family, the most holistic family life. He has a family, he has kids that love him, he has his house. It's very, none of the Titans do. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're all still swinging bachelors, and here's Wally just kind of growing up. And Barry's not even in main continuity. Barry's not even married to Iris. And so what do you do when you're the guy and you're seeing the other kid like living his life and growing up and doing this thing, and you start to think about, wait, what am I doing? And I think that's a really interesting thing to explore with Barry. It's like, who am I now? And what do I want? Do I want what Wally wants, or do I want something different? And I think that stuff is really, really interesting.
Is Wally going to be the patriarch of the Flash family, or is it still Barry?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, because I feel like Wally he has a lot of leadership qualities, but I do feel like Barry, kind of like when he walks into a room, it's kind of like he kind of, everybody looks to him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also think that about Jay Garrick. I think Jay Garrick is the classic Flash, and I would love to spend more time with Jay doing stuff too, because he's not just Poppy to the grandkids. He's this guy who's been through a war and seen a lot of incredible things. So I don't know. I don't, and I also don't necessarily write the Flash family like that. I write them more as there is a symbiotic team element to it. I mean, it's almost like the way Linda is, it's almost like Linda and Iris are the bosses. so they're the ones keeping it all together. But as I push the Flash family forward, I mean, one of the great things is, like, during the Dark Crisis thing, I was able to bring in a lot more speedsters, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed splitting them up and telling stories with the individual characters, and then they're just trying to dig in a little bit more, and finding myself going like, ooh, I really like Jesse Quick, I really like Max, I really want to play with Bart, and just thinking about, but also thinking about, what can I do with the Flash family as a whole that would be really cool to do. Like, instead of just, oh, they're all just running in different parts of the world and doing this thing, it's like, no, what would be the purpose? If I can make a purpose with the Flash family, what would that be? And I think about that a lot. And I think about, and I've already teased in the earliest comics stuff that I'd want to do. So I'm hoping that I can finish what I teased into this other thing.
Well, I think what he did in the Dark Crisis tie-in was awesome. Like I said, it really did bring together the sense of the Flash family. Like I said, you had Jesse Quick, Max Mercury, Jay Garrick shows up. You eventually get to Barry Allen. You had the two Wallies in there as well. The kids, Linda, which we'll all get to in a moment. How hard is it to come up with a viable villain when that family all gets together? Because, like you said, Flash really is one of the most powerful superheroes in all of comic books. Once again, anything that can move at the speed of light can pretty much obliterate anything that it hits.
Right.
So when you bring the whole family active, what are you going to come up with that can keep them all as threatened?
Well, in terms of like what, I mean, that's a great question, because it's something I think about a lot. Like, what's part of his rogues gallery that I can really, sink my teeth into. And sometimes it's events. I mean, that's why I had this Eclipso thing, because I wanted to be, well, what is Flash against magic? What does that mean? What does that look like? Because it's a little off kilter. It doesn't follow the rules of physics. So does that mean that his speed can beat that? That was kind of an interesting question in my head about, well, that's interesting. I want to kind of explore that a little bit with the Eclipso thing. And then with the 1 Minute War, this race that comes down to Earth called the Fraction, they are super fast. They utilize the Speed Force like, we utilize solar power or whatever. And because of that, they're moving very fast. So then it's kind of a great equalizer. So the speedsters are not speedsters. They're just heroes that have to deal with this thing that's in front of them. And that to me really got me excited about the idea of like, okay, well, then who are these people? What's the character of these people that are fighting a war in 1 minute of regular continuity time? And what does that look like? And so that was really cool.
Well, another major dynamic shift that you've made in Flash comic books is that Linda Park is exhibiting superpowers.
Right.
Now, once again, we in the standard superhero storyline, it's always, the guy has the powers. He comes home, he has, the girlfriend that's like, oh my god, come back safe, and now she can take part.
Yes,
So
yes,
how
yes.
does that alter the relationship now that Linda is not waiting at home anymore, but now it can actually be part of the adventure?
Well, hmm. I mean, the Linda part of it is interesting because we don't know if this is a permanent thing or this is a long thing. And obviously that, by the time the podcast has come out, so that in the annual we hint at the fact that she may or may not be pregnant. And that aspect of it either puts a ticking clock on what's happening to Linda or not happening to Linda. But for the moment, she is she is a valued member. And it's not just that. What I thought about when I was taking on Linda and thinking about her and reading Wade's run and reading the different versions of Linda is one of the ways I wanted to separate her from other female loves interests of DC characters. Was there's so many reporters, but I know a lot of reporters, I know a lot of columnists, podcasts, and everything that are still writers and have like a big dream to be a writer. And I thought, oh, this is a natural progression that she wants to get into writing and she wants to write a novel and she wants to do this stuff. And so that would separate her a little bit. And in terms of that, that's what's interesting about the speed to me. It's not that the speed gives you this power to do all this stuff. It really amplifies so many character traits that you have. Like Impulse having speed powers is manifested way differently than somebody else having speed powers, and that's really neat. So with her, the fact that she's a journalist, the fact that she has an attention to detail, the fact that she's no nonsense, in Dark Crisis, she lets Barry have it, and there's a certain amount of like directness in her that Wally doesn't have, because Wally is a bit, like I said, more empathetic and a bit more joyful and hopeful, and she's like mama bear, and also like, let's get answers, let's do what we need to do. And I love all that, and that the speed just kind of plays that out a little bit. The last issue, it's the element. She saw one of the guys that kidnapped her, Iris and Maxine, and she just like punched him like a billion times in the face. And it was like, that to me was such a character moment. It's like, yes, this is who she is now. And hopefully we'll see that develop. But what I don't want to lose is that she is a critical member of the family. She and Wally are a team, and yeah. So I don't know if I necessarily answered the question, but I just wanted to diatribe about Linda.
No, I think it was good, and I think it's also interesting that the kids have powers too, because there seems to be a power struggle between the parents and the kids, where the kids want to go out, be superheroes, do what they can do, and show what they, the powers, and the parents understandably are like, what the hell are you doing? You're in the house.
Yeah.
So how critical is this storyline going to continue, where the kids are apparently forcing their parents to let them be heroes, but at the same time are still kids?
Well, in the first arc, what I'm really just trying to be consistent with what I've written already. And there's this moment where Wally meets his daughter in the future, right? And she's like, I'm okay, and you taught me how to be a hero, because there was no, like, there's two ways this is going to go. Either I'm going to be a hero or I'm going to be a villain, type thing. And Wally understands that it is his obligation almost, that he needs to train these kids. And so it's hard to be totally mad at a kid. I have really smart girls, and my oldest is really, really smart. And so when she says something, or like she's figured out something that's way above her pay grade, like when it comes to maturity or whatever, it's like I can't necessarily get mad at her because she's just this amazing sponge. And the same thing with Ira and Jay. They just want to be heroes. They want to be heroes, and they're like, all these adults are not looking at us like we want to be looked at, and so we're going to prove it to them. And they keep proving it to them, but they also have this wide-eyed innocence of it. And with them, I mean, my heart, I love those guys so much, mostly also because in the DC universe, they've taken a lot of kids and they've aged them up. Like all of Young Justice is much older now. And I feel like there's this hole for kids that are like 13 or younger, that I'm like, oh, let's start piecing together this mini little team of Ira and Jay and Maxine, and I have a couple other characters I would love to put in there. And pardon me, and it's been really fun. And those characters, Wally's daughter could potentially be, faster than Wally. And as we saw from the last issue, Jay is unbelievably strong. Power Girl does the thunderclap and it's like pretty big blast, but then Jay does the thunderclap and it's like destroying everything.
Yeah.
And I also think that's a hint of an issue I want to come up, where Wally eventually is like, I have really got to just bear down and get these kids trained up a little, so that, because even Linda's come around to it. She's like, all right, fine, like we got to do this thing. That's the only way that you keep them safe, is by teaching what they need to know.
Well, I think one of the best moments in one of the recent issues is that it's the storyline with Knives Maroney and the Night Flash. Knives Maroney is such a cool character. Is he a one-off? I mean, or is he going to come back? Is there any way you can fit him back in the storyline?
At the end of that, I set it up. It's like Knives finds that little transponder that Mr. Terrific had made that was allowing people with Speed Force to traverse the Speed Force and go to different locations. And yeah, I've got I would love to bring Knives back, because again, Knives, and then this character that my daughter helped create called Dr. Nightmare. There's some other characters that I always think, oh, these would be perfect part of Ira's and Jay's rogues gallery.
So we're gonna get like a young Flash spinoff with the kids.
I mean, that's always my hope. My hope is that people read the Flash enough that they're like, man, we can do what's happening in the Batman universe, or what's happening in the Superman universe, is that people will get so excited about it that they'll want another book. They'll want something a little different. That's like, I would love to do a book that's somewhat of an anthology, where it's, Jesse Quick 1 week or 1 month, or for a couple issues, and then Max Mercury, whatever, or just split it up. I think the barrier to entry for the Flash, and this was always a barrier to entry for me, I was like, how interesting is a guy that can run fast? That was kind of the thing, is he just runs fast. But that's such a misnomer. That's not necessarily what it's really about. And when I took over, I said, I want this to be kind of Doctor Who. I want this to be able to go anywhere. And that's what I think is the real lore of the Flash. He's a guy that can go forwards or backwards in time. He can use the Speed Force almost like a Stargate and go anywhere in the multiverse. And because of what I'm doing in Flashpoint Beyond, I'm starting to touch a little bit on hyper time, and what they're building at Terrific Tech has never really shown up yet. But that's because there's been crises and wars on Earth 3 and like all this other stuff. So and then and I've got intergalactic super wrestlers showing up here this month in the Flash, and I couldn't be more excited about that either.
So if there's any editors listening, we need some Flash spin-off stories.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, they listen, but I'm a complete nutcase. So I mean, I sent my editor, and I made a wrestling promo for the upcoming one, where I had I have a professional, like I got a belt made that says I'll show you, check this out.
Okay.
This is so stupid. But Fernando, who did the art, so I had this belt made that's the multiverse or intergalactic wrestling champ, and it has
awesome.
The Grant Morrison map, and it has on here like the different powers you get if you can get this belt. And so I did a promo, like an old school wrestling promo, basically as my alter ego Smash Adams. It's like, buy this book, and also if you're a pro wrestler and you want to fight for this belt, I'll totally do it.
That is absolutely awesome. I think that's what I love about your run of the Flash right now, is that you really brought fun to the Flash again.
Oh,
and the issue I'm going to talk about, it might be one of my favorite issues in the last few years, is Flash 776, which is the meta issue. If I don't know if anyone knows which one I'm talking about, but it's the one where Flash is literally directed to the reader as they're reading it. That was such a smart issue. And how did that whole idea come about?
I've been if you've read comics as long as I have, you start backlogging ideas in your head. And I'd had an idea like that for a long time. And then and then and then they let me write the Flash. And then I just kept thinking like, oh, well, originally uh Eclipso, that the glaive lands on Earth, and it was this whole thing of like whoever grabs this glaive and if he's evil will get all this power. But then I found out like literally it was coming out like a month in a month, and Marvel had done something like that with like Black Knight or something, and I was like, oh crap. And I was just starting to think, okay, he's going to take this, and I really like Amethyst and Gem World, and I had this old thought about Eclipso using Gem World, and I thought about this stuff, but I'm like, how am I going to get the Flash there? And then I was like, oh no, this should be a magic thing. And I didn't want it to be, I don't like magic that's just like instantaneous, you get it. It has
Yeah.
to be magic that's kind of earned a little bit. And it was like, no, we can get there, but we have to go through this causeway. And then I was like, I can't, I hope maybe I can do it. Maybe I'm allowed, maybe I'll do this, because I've been wanting to do this idea and I've been thinking about it for a long time. And like a sorcerer. And in fact, the opening 2 pages I've known for years. I thought about having something where a magician, a magic user in a universe, like turns around and then points to the reader, like, no, you need to help me. And then I give it to Fernando, who totally gets me. He like reads my mind, and then he does it 1,000% better than I could ever do. And he starts doing it. And in fact, the layers of that issue are, it's interactive. You got to get from point A to point B. But then I wanted to add the thing at the end. It's like, okay, did you find the sigils? Because you need to touch them in the right order. And part of it is I wanted the reader to feel like a kid while reading it. And the people that got it were like, this is really fun, and they were having fun doing it. And then at the end, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see these. So now suddenly you have to go back and find them. And by the way, when I got the art, I didn't even see them either. I was like, where are they? Like I was like, I don't know where they are, and somebody wrote me they had broke their computer because they were watching it digitally and they had flipped it upside down
Oh
and they shot their
no.
computer. But people were just like, this is bananas, and they were having so much fun with it. And that was the joy. That was the joy of it. It was just this weird little interstitial as we dropped into then into the Eclipso saga thing. And I couldn't believe how well it turned out. And I really tried hard to make sure I was printing out pages on my printer and like gluing them to make sure that when the page turned, okay, this is how it needs to be printed out. And it worked. It was really fun. I'm really glad that they let me do that. DC's been so good to me, and I have no right to have all this good stuff. I wrote an issue with my daughter. It turned out great. I've been able to do just little quirky things here and there. And the way that I look at the Flash is usually I do like a 3 or 4 issue like arc, and then I do a couple one-offs so that anybody that is just joining the Flash, there's quick on ramps. Like you don't have to be like, oh, I don't know what's happened for the last X amount of time. Like you get it. You're like, oh, he has a family and he's fighting a wrestler. And then it's like, okay, you're in, and now we'll go to the next little arc, and then we'll do another little fun thing, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really fun.
When you're pitching 776 to the editors, did they think you were crazy at first? Like, what the hell are you even talking about?
I don't necessarily pitch. I sometimes I would be like, sometimes they'd ask like, what do you want to do? Or I'll give like a blurb what I want to do. Most everybody I've worked with kind of, I say kind of because I'm also extremely like excitable and probably don't explain it the best way possible. I've garnered enough goodwill that people are like, all right, I mean, you've done okay so far, so I guess we'll trust you. And that's huge to me. That's like that type of, I remember being with Paul Kaminsky, and we were talking about the annual that came out this year, and I go, man, I don't know if people are going to dig it or not. And I said something, and he looks at me, he's like, yeah, I don't know either. Like, honestly, I mean, and he was joking, but there was a little bit of like, it's a weird book. It's like, it's a book about Linda's book that is about her life within the universe of the Flash, you know, and it's a very peculiar thing. And I'm so glad I get to make those. I get to do that because I think for me as a comic reader, I like it when people do something different. I like coming to a comic and going, I'm not exactly sure what this is going to be. I mean, when people come to my comics right now, I feel like what they get is they know they're going to giggle. You know, it's going to be like, it'll be slightly silly. There'll be some really cool action. And hopefully they get some really heartfelt moments throughout it, because that's something, it doesn't mean anything unless there's some heart behind it. Like the kid Flash of it, let's say. I did this, you know, a couple issues with Kid Flash, and the way I'd done it, I had done Wally. I started working with Wally, and then I started thinking about Linda and the kids and bringing them in. And you can see my focus is starting to get bigger and bigger. And with Kid Flash, I was like, okay, my friend Tim is doing Teen Titans Academy, and Kid Flash is over there. And from what I read about Kid Flash, I was like, oh, I don't really have a handle on that character. And I also feel like this is no fault of anybody's, but it's like I feel like he's left out in the wind a little bit. That's what I felt like. And I felt like, well, Wally's Flash, and he has to have his kid Flash, and what would that relationship be like? And they're supposed to be cousins. And I was thinking about my relationship with my cousins, and my cousins are just, they would complete. I'm more like Kid Flash. They would, and my cousins are more like Wally. That would be like, you know, getting me into trouble, you know. And that was the thing that, oh, this is going to be great, because he's going to get Kid Flash to play hooky, and then he's going to basically, you know, just try to connect with him and say, hey, listen, you know, we're a team, and I don't want to be your boss, I just want your help. And it was a different dynamic, and people really responded to that in a great way. It was really fun to write. It was really fun to write Kid Flash like that. And maybe I'm writing them all getting along too well, I don't know, but I'm having fun seeing this team that kind of interacts. And there's going to be some interaction, without spoiling anything, there's going to be some interactions between Bart and Kid Flash that I think are going to be some of my favorite things I've written. And yeah, I'm really excited about that stuff.
Well, like I said, I think I said to you off the interview is that I credit you with getting me back into the Flash. I was buying the Flash during Jeff Johns' run, and then
Yeah.
I kind of walked away for a while.
Yeah.
And I credit your storylines for bringing me back, because they are so much fun. They do a great balance of, you know, lightheartedness, but also you can still, as an adult, enjoy the seriousness of a lot of the storylines. Right. And I find it, you know, it's very fun. What can we look forward to in the upcoming issues of the Flash?
So, like I said, Intergalactic Super Wrestlers are part of Wham, Wrestlers Across the Multiverse, and they're landing in Central City, and then it's going to be a full-on SmackDown, and then we're going to explore some of the stuff after that with the warden who is running for mayor from Iron Heights Penitentiary, and what's going on with him, and what, you know, we teased that mystery a little bit ago, and kind of, I don't know if wrap up some loose ends, or at least explore that a little more. And then come January, we are right into 1 Minute War, and that's going to be twice a month.
Very
and
cool.
Flash is going to be twice a month, and hopefully if people read it, then I can keep doing it twice a month. And what's great is I've been having incredible art. I've been getting art in from Roger Cruz that's unbelievable. Fernando's coming back for these next three issues that are coming up. And I've got some, and if I play my cards right and I'm doing twice a month, then I'm going to be able to hopefully work with some of these other artists that I've worked with before. Like, I got to tell you, like, one of the joys of my life was getting Kevin McGuire to draw a little bit of, you know, the Flash when he jumps in Reverse Flash's body. And as like a lifelong Justice League International fan, and think JM, DeMatteis and Keith Giffen are geniuses, and to have Kevin McGuire as a genius and be able to, like, and I just saw him for the first time, met him for the first time at New York Comic Con, and I was full on Chris Farley in an elevator with him. It was terrible. I was like, remember that time that you know, and I was just like gushing over him terribly. But that's, yeah, again, a lot of fun, a lot of excitement. I came up with another great Flash idea that I'm kind of boiling down that'll happen next year, hopefully. And depending on what's happening in the DC universe, because everybody I think is starting to know that I'm totally up for having my book cross into other books. I've been having a blast, and that's what I loved growing up. So, you know, when they came to me, oh, you want to do something with War for Earth 3? Yeah, okay, great. You want to do some Dark Crisis? Yeah, absolutely. You know, like I'm 100% in. It doesn't even matter what it is. You don't even have to ask me. Just, you know. So I'm excited. And then Flashpoint Beyond, that I'm doing the number 6, just is wrapping up with Tim Sheridan and Jeff Johns. I think the FOC is Sunday, and we're wrapping up that 6 issue. Incredibly great experience for me, and that's going to lead into some other cool stuff into the DC universe too.
Well, it all sounds awesome. Like I said, I really loved what you've done with the Flash. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I can't wait to read the next upcoming issues, Mr. Adams. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Yes. Thank you.